Greetings and salutations from back in Costa Rica again. If you don't know who I am, I'm Suzanne Tidkamar. I used to write a daily column called No Longer Quivering for a place called Pathos. I wrote there for over 10 years, and it's kind of an odd career path for me. But I started writing there. I found I really enjoyed writing. It was something that I felt like I had at least a modicum of talent at. And one of the things that I did there that I absolutely loved was book reviews. So I'm trying to get back in the groove of doing that. And I've been kind of up, down, and all over the place. So this is my Handbaskets from Hell series, and I'm trying to pick up and finish things that I've started and not completed. 2024 for me is going to be a year of completion in so many stupid ways. Let me just say, first of all, don't bully anybody that I'm going to talk about here. Don't just don't do any of that. And for my book reviews, I don't think I'm going to do the Gypsy Rose Blanchard book when it comes out. I'm seeing so many people talking about this book that certain other creators actually have copies of. I'm not going there with it. First of all, I had to be more interested in the subject matter than to do that. So I'm trying to finish up two books. Now the coding on this book feels weird. Trying to finish up two books that I actually started, and I did finally finish them both up. Counting on, hey Christine, Happy New Year to you too. Counting on, I finally finished it on my break, and the Britney Spears one, The Woman in Me, which I had no intention of ever reading, but my daughter passed it along with me, along with her copy of Counting On. That's one thing about living in Costa Rica 99.99% of the time when I get books, it's not hard copies. I'm picking up the Kindle version. So here we go. And I'm going to finish the Doug Wilson one next week. It it was kind of a pain in the butt because the Doug Wilson one had to do with fixing your marriage. And I expected it to be the same horrible pile of nonsense that Doug routinely craps out, but it wasn't. It was actually kind of middle of the road. So I won't be covering it in one go, one go. And here we are, sparkling cup full of Diet Coke, and we're ready. Okay, so I have to start with this one of the two. This one, okay. In Louisiana, when Britney was super popular, in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, there was a huge billboard. You haven't read either of those? I'm interested in your opinion on them. Well, there was a huge billboard in Baton Rouge on Florida Boulevard. There was a picture of Britney Spears, and it said, Britney Spears, the pride of Louisiana. Some wag defaced that sign with a can of spray paint and turned the pride of Louisiana to the ride of Louisiana. And I hate to say it, it was kind of a harbinger for this book. Oh my goodness. I feel like I should take myself into the bathroom and scrub myself from head to toe because I read this trashy thing. This book was one of the worst things I've read in quite a while. The reason that it was awful is because of the trauma that Brittany underwent, a lot of the mental abuse that she suffered, the trauma that triggered mental problems in her life. The book, she just justified so much of what her family did to her and then complained about it later. Uh, by the time she was 10 or 11, she was drinking itty bitty White Russians. And by 14, she was sleeping with whoever she felt like. And there was some drug abuse. There was a lot of Adderall abuse, like somebody else is rumored, somebody we call without a box of Kleenex is rumored to do. And she didn't seem to think that her Adderall use was a problem, even though apparently everybody around her thought it was a problem. It is hard to be a child star, and it's a worse problem to be a child star if your parents her father was in mash and alcoholism, which is common in Louisiana. Sadly enough, I know so many alcoholics down there. There's a reason that I've never lived there after I became a full adult and finished my schooling. It's just a really hard environment to grow up in. And so I can't totally fault Britney for the things that she's done. Most of the time, the New Orleans area, people drink routinely. I've seen Cajuns put beer and um, whiskey in their baby bottles during teething. It's different things like that. So I like to tell everybody it is a whole different place than the rest of the U.S. in so many different ways. The parents tend to exploit. Exactly, that's what they did. They exploited her, and she's complaining in here about being put under a conservatorship. But let me tell you, reading through this, I think like she probably needed to be under a conservatorship. You had Kevin Federline taking advantage of her, which was something I said at the time. I'm not a Britney Spears fan. I enjoyed her circus album. My daughter, who originally bought this book, was a Britney Spears fan. In fact, when we packed up everything and moved here, one of the things that made it here that I laughed the hardest over was a Britney Spears travel bus that was bought for my daughter as a present back when she was a girl. So this is the danger. This book is a cautionary tale of what happens when you exploit the crap out of your child for dollars. Brittany probably needed the conservatorship when she was put under it, but it should have been a completely uninvolved guardian ad litem put in charge of her money and her career and everything else. And she should have still been able to have a say. When you get to the part of the book where she's in the conservatorship, it's her father who's spending all of her money and other people who've got this conservatorship over her with no oversight. There's no guardian ad litem looking at everything. There's none of that. It is just like they just handed Jamie Spears a blank checkbook. Matthew Perry said in his book that he was a colicky baby and the doctor prescribed barbiturates his parents gave him to keep him quiet. Christine, that is the problem with being born in certain eras. One thing I got about 8 years ago, my mother gave me was a pamphlet that she was given when I was born. And in there, it talked about giving a colicky baby alcohol and or drugs to stop with the colic. And it talked about how smoking was not harmful for your baby. I'm an asthmatic. I can tell you that's a freaking lie. So, and it would help mama get her figure back sooner. That was just all these things that we didn't know any better that were promoted as the answer. So, Louisiana being the backward place it is, I'm not entirely surprised. And you have to realize, I don't think Louisiana has Coogan accounts. The account's named for Jackie Coogan because his family ran off with all of his money from when he was a child star in the 30s, I think it was. So they had to put this law in place because he lost everything. And because he was child star, his parents controlled everything. So I doubt seriously that Britney's family set up a Coogan account for her. So she's lucky that she was a mega star and there was enough money coming in to be invested for her that she will never have to work again in her life. The thing that I found curious about the Britney book was my mother was very nauseous when pregnant with me. She thankfully didn't take thalidomide. Was born in 1960. You were born the same year as me. My mother was on thalidomide, and luckily I have my arms. I did have a stroke in utero, which I didn't find out until almost 3 years ago. I didn't find that out until they went to map my brain after my last stroke, and they were looking at this old damage in there and saying, this damage goes back to in utero. And I was always a clumsy kid. Clumsy, clumsy, clumsy. I'm still clumsy to this day, and my husband will tell you. And, I don't doubt 1 minute that the stroke I had probably was from thalidomide or something else that my mother was exposed to in that time frame. Exactly what that would be, I don't know for sure, but you live and you learn, and that's the thing about medicine. Medicine, they're practicing medicine, and it's not always a subtle science. Now, Britney has come out from under her conservatorship, and I saw everybody saying what a wonderful thing that was, okay, and how Britney would benefit from that so much. Not quite. I'm waiting to see what she does next, what the deal is, how she spends the rest of her life. I am a big believer in second acts in people's lives. So many of us have had to put ourselves back together after calamitous thing happening, tragedy, all sorts of things. Look at people like Colonel Sanders, who didn't even come into his own until after his 1960s. I think, oh, yes, there's that second act. It's so wondrous and miraculous. And that gives me all the feels. Right now, I'm reading a book about the guy who was um, the advertising icon, the most interesting man in the world for Dos Equis. And it's interesting. It's a fascinating book. And again, it's second act. So, Brittany, I want to see your second act. I want it to be awesome, even though I feel kind of afraid that it might not be, because she has certainly posted a lot of rather bizarre stuff from online from having been removed from her conservatorship, like dancing with knives and having her sons begging her on social media not to keep exposing herself. None of that None of that bodes well, but then again, she's still young at 40ish. There's still a lot of time to make a lot of mistakes and to fix all of them and to come out in a happier, healthier place. So that's what I'm counting on, and that's what I'm hoping for Brittany, because her childhood was a nightmare, and her early 20s were too. Her 20s were, and a lot of her 30s. So I'm hoping for Brittany. I'm hoping that she leaves all of this behind and has a completely different life. That's what I would like to see. Now, when I started doing some research into the book, I found some very curious things. Number one, there are two different claims online of ghostwriting, because I was reading this going, even though this is simple language and verbatim to what I've in here in my mind, how Brittany would speak, I don't believe Brittany broke down and wrote this thing. It is so hard to put together a cohesive narrative over a course of a book. I know, because I'm struggling with that now. My husband's editing it, and he's telling me, "Oh, you gotta break this into 2 chapters, you gotta fix this, you gotta do that." It's a lot easier to write that daily column. It just is. To go ahead and dash out that fast food of writing and move on. Breathe in, breathe out, move on. A book is a whole different thing. So I was doing some digging, bit off topic, but some Anna Christie did some interesting video with their lawyer you should watch. I plan on it. I have time now. I'm back in Costa Rica. There's nothing on the schedule except my husband does have to go, and it looks like it's gonna be surgery in a couple of weeks. I will need something to be watching in the hotel room or the hospital room for 3 days, and I'll be catching up with everything then. And I gotta give a shout out to Roadhog of all people in the middle of this, because this reminded me. My son has what he calls his Friday night freaks he watches. And he hate watches some guy who calls himself King Cobra. And he keeps inflicting King Cobra on me when I try not to inflict without a box of Kleenex on him. So Jeremy Roadhog went after King Cobra, and I was just watching yesterday. He's laughing. It's like a collision of real life and cyber life for me, and I just laughed. So yeah, I'll be down to watch that. I'm gonna have to do. People have said it. I just haven't yet. Um, so for the Britney Spears book, you got two different people are being listed as the sole copywriter. Not copywriter, ghostwriter for this. There is a guy that I keep seeing listed as having written it, Luke Dempsey. He edited and ghost wrote Mark Manson's The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F, and a pile of other celebrity kind of books, and a few of his own. And I was interested reading in a couple of his original books, like A Supremely Bad Idea, Three Mad Birders and Their Quest to See It All. He and his buddies went off to do some bird watching, crazy bird watching all over the US and chasing. And I'm not finding any evidence that he actually was the ghostwriter for this book. And I'm kind of glad for him, because most of the books he's written are a little more bizarre. Okay. Yeah, Roadhog's still around. He's just doing a lot of different content, but he's doing like commentary on other YouTubers. That's his jam. Let him do it. More power to him. And if he's going after people that are as bizarre as King Cobra, more power to you, buddy. King Cobra is this guy who basically begs for super chats and donos. He's a dono boy, and he proceeds to get rip roaring drunk, high on his live streams. I don't know why I'm going to watch him more than 5 minutes. My son has made me watch him a few times. But there you go. Not everybody is a suitable YouTuber for everybody else, and we're all allowed to have distinct likes and dislikes. But King Cobra, So I'm gonna move on to the other book. Like, let me finish this up real quick. I'm stupid to not today. The Independent and the British papers is saying that Sam Lansky was the ghostwriter, not Luke Dempsey. And Lansky is a journalist, and he's never ghostwritten anything before. This would have been his first outing. I don't know for sure who the actual ghostwriter is, but it does strike me as very odd that I'm seeing two different names. And I'm going to say that Dempsey seems like the serious writer. Lansky, who knows? And I saw a bunch of articles that said Britney was only getting 25% of the net profits for her memoir. I find that fascinating too. And we had some Britney news just the other day when Britney said that she is, quote, will never return to the music industry, unquote. She's never going back. Says she's never doing it. And she's making all these claims about being a ghostwriter for a bunch of songs. I don't know. It's Britney. You don't know how much truth that is, or how that's just a little bit of what Britney stuff going around. So I got to move on to this. The other one I read this one I finished up when I was at my daughter's house, and she gave this to me. She wasn't going to hang on to it. This book took me forever to read. Why? Because I'm out of a church with very similar beliefs. Okay, my old fundamentalist, quiverful church, exact same beliefs, even though only a few people there followed the IFB, and only a few people followed, Institute for Basic Life Principles in Bill Gothard, which the Duggars were just enmeshed with Gothard and his organization. And so many things that Jill talked about in this book are things that I've experienced firsthand myself, and it was just making me jump, jump, jump in unpleasant ways. Every time that I would try to finish doing my review, try to finish reading it, I just could not do it. It was just more traumatic than I ever dreamed. I'm going to say this, though. My daughter was right. She said that I should finish it because the end of the book was at least more hopeful than the rest of the book. Jill did reach some type of detente with her father, Jim Bob, and he did pay them some of the money that was owed Jill and Derek. And I gotta say, I gained an entirely new appreciation for Derek Dillard that I never had before. I had excused him as just another fame hoeing, trying to marry a Duggar person against so many of them. I just assumed that's what he was like, but no, Jill lucked out. She got a good guy there. She got a good guy in many words. Now, do I agree with all of his religious beliefs? Heck no. Heck no, heck no. But there you go. So Jill managed to hammer out something of a piece with her father and something of a piece with her, the way she was raised. I don't judge her too harshly on what she's done since she left for a lot of reasons. But one of the biggest reasons is because she's on her journey. She's not done yet. We talk about this in deconstruction a lot. Deconstruction is tearing everything down to you're down to the bedrock. And once you're down to the bedrock, you figure out what it is you do believe in, if you believe in God and what that looks like. And you reconstruct your life based upon that bedrock you've taken it down to. So many people in the religious world love to say if you deconvert, you're just going to hell and this and that and the other thing. That's not so. And it is a journey, it's a process. I am still doing that process myself. I'm still going there. I have good days, I have bad days. And reading the book, I can tell you Jill is still on her journey. Jill is having good days, bad days, and she's trying to navigate the world for the first time without a map. It's hard. Seems they were at the big house over Christmas. Jim Bob was apparently on a mission trip. Not sure if that's true or just rumors. Yeah, I saw that, Christine. And if Jill was at the big house seeing her family, more power to her. She loves that family. She loves her father still throughout all of this. And I don't blame her. She loves her siblings. Many of her siblings are trapped financially and will never be able to leave until they actually 100% step away. And when you read how her and Derek were having to navigate finances and everything else, whenever you've got that going on, it's hard. I've spoken about that before, having to do with the quiverful, because so many of these people do not have any type of education in place to work. They're not making the high level jobs. They're not showing up to be a day trader or anything else who makes high dollar. I guess if she was there, I'm happy for Christine. That's where I am. I'm happy for her. If that is what she needed to do, she needed to see her siblings over the holidays. Go for it. Go for it. Go for it. But I'm excited for her that the life she is constructing for herself. I think that's incredibly awesome. I used to write about the Duggars routinely for No Longer Quivering. And it was always a tightrope walk because you couldn't report on each and every rumor, because if you did, they would be all Duggar all the time and all dumb. And I leave that to other people, like without a box of Kleenex, to do that, even back then. What I would do was go through and try to parse exactly what was going on with whom and just go from there because it was too much. And I never had criticism of those kids. My problem was with the parents and the fact that there were no Coogan accounts for those kids, the fact that they were using their kids as unpaid slave labor for so many things. She said in her book that she doesn't resent at all being asked to work on their house, the tin mansion in Springdale, Arkansas. She doesn't resent that at all. She thinks that it was a good thing to learn those tools. And while I think that learning tools is a good idea, I don't think that expecting your child labor crew to build your house is realistic either. And I think it does fall into abuse. But like so many of us that leave that thing, it takes you a while to unpack everything, to peel all the layers from the onion. And she's still on her journey. So I'm not going to say anything about that. I'm happy she has Derek. He seems like a good support. He does seem like a good support. on earth did she luck out so much? Because I really thought he was just another guy trying to get with a Duggar daughter for Jim Bob's approval and attention and everything else, but that's not at all what he ended up being, and I think that's awesome. Sometimes we end up with what we deserve in life. Not all the time, but sometimes, and I feel like Jill is Jill has her karma going on right now. Now Jill, unlike Britney, made no attempt to hide the fact that she worked with a ghostwriter. She even talked about it in the book. She worked with Craig Borlase, I guess that's how you say his name, or Borlase, and Derek had input into her book, and that's a good thing. I really felt like this was going to be a book written by Derek. I figured the first tell-all book would be from Derek, and she manages to talk about the issues and to expose a lot of the abuse without being, how can I put this, without being tacky about it, without just being so sensationalized. It wasn't clickbaity at all. It was just her trying to talk about her life and how this came about. So, Jill, if you're out there, I wish you nothing but best of all things. And it was kind of heartbreaking to read about how she felt about people that wrote about her, being that I was one of those people. And after the exposure of her and Jess's abuse, I swear I came very close to sending sympathy cards saying, I'm so sorry that you've been exposed this way. Because that's really how I felt, even though I was making money off the exposure myself. All of us that wrote about the Duggars were in that time frame. And the joke used to be, Josh, reoffend, please. Mama needs a new washing machine. But it was a dumb joke, very tacky. They really exploited those kids. A lot of money should have been put into, yeah, they should have been put into accounts for those kids. Exactly. And I found it super hypocritical of TLC because when TLC developed Here Comes Honey Boo Boo with Honey Boo Boo, of course, and with June Shannon and Honey Boo Boo's father, and the only thing I can think is Sugar Bear. And I don't remember what his real name was. I mean, how bizarre is that? When they set that show up, TLC forced that family to set up Coogan accounts for the kids, for all the kids that appeared on the screen, not just Honey Boo Boo. And they put money in there. And I haven't followed any kind of news whether or not June Shannon managed to access that money and touch it or whatever, but TLC forced them to get Coogan accounts. TLC did not force the Duggars to get Coogan accounts, which they should have. Without a good education or background in writing, she was wise to use a ghostwriter. I know you talked about how hard writing a book can be. It can be incredibly hard, and I'm still struggling with it. And I also have all these new stories that have come out after I talked to my kids. Like the other day, I said the story that my kids kept telling me, the My Little Fisher Price, my first drag queen story, about their first exposure to drag queens happened at our old fundagelical church. And I totally blanked on that. I'd totally forgotten that. And the guy was super funny when he did that. Super funny, super everything, because all he did was just throw shade at everybody at church for their idiosyncrasies. And it was one of the funniest things of all times. But as my daughter was talking about on a deeper, it was one of the funniest things of all times. But as my daughter was talking about on a deeper level, it was all about first exposure to drag queens, and all these people are losing it who are religious over the issues of drag performers, transgendered people, people who are non-binary, people who identify as gay or lesbian, and everything in between, the whole pile, the whole shebang. They hate them all. It's pretty interesting. I don't hate anybody like that because I've never walked a day in their shoes. I don't know how difficult that would be. So I try to affirm folks like that are getting tons of hate. I saw somebody, our Walmart cashier in Delaware, was pretty clearly somewhere on the somewhere on the spectrum of gender. And I didn't stop to ask. I just called them by their name on their name tag and tried to be as absolutely nice as I could be because those people already endure enough hate from everybody else. I don't want to add to that. So there you go. Both of those books are done, finito, and I'm glad because the Britney one, while it was a quick read, it was harder to read in some ways than the Jill Duggar Dillard book. Even though the Dillard book, I had to keep putting it down and thinking about what was said because so much of what was said was just so toxic. Both books are a good study in learning what happens when your parents exploit you for money. What happens to your mind when you're put in a religion that emphasizes guilt, when you're abused by your parents who are saying, hey, you're sinful because of XYZ, you're going to hell. You get both of these kinds of women. And I wish the best for both of them now. So next week it's going to be Decluttering Your Marriage from Doug Wilson, his most normal book out there. Now, somebody asked me what my favorite books were that I read this year, and I read so many of them. I like the Grim Up North series by David Gatward. I have enjoyed All the Light We Cannot See. That one was just amazing. Another one that I read that I absolutely adored was The Beekeeper of Aleppo. Now, this time on my trip, I didn't have as good of a luck with books. I got a book that supposedly is a fantasy book that supposedly could be made into a Netflix series. And I was reading this like, because it was not very, it was not very good. So right now I'm reading the Goldsmith book about the life of the most interesting guy in the world, at least according to Dos Equis beer. And like I said, it's a book of second acts, and I'm enjoying the hell out of it. I decluttered my marriage by getting divorced. Cheapskate! That's one way to do it. That's a big way to do it. Um, Parents exploiting their kid has become an epidemic. I'm glad that Ruby, Frank, and Jody were. Yep, I'm glad they were caught. And I think that Ruby finally pled guilty, was my understanding, and going straight to jail. They're being punished. Exactly. Exactly. So Doug Wilson's marriage advice isn't as toxic as one might expect. So I'm going to go over that. And it's nowhere near as toxic as the marriage advice given in that incredibly horrible book written by Laurie Alexander about everything. It's called The Power of the Transformed Life. I don't recommend that for life. I don't recommend her book for anything. Even the things that she could have talked about and helped people with, like finances, figuring out your personal finances. She dropped the ball big time. And some of the stories in there just gave me pause, like the one where she poked a hole in her diaphragm so she wouldn't have to work. Who does that? Women who have enough white entitlement to be able to not work, whose husbands bring in that kind of money. So it's disingenuous for her to be talking about that to her supporters because most of them are not in the same financial position as she and her husband were. And to say that just shows that she doesn't have the first clue about what normal life is like for most people in the United States. Okay, so that's my ranting about those books today. Um, like I said earlier, I probably will not be reading or reviewing the Gypsy Rose Blanchard book. I've been watching everything she's doing since she came out of jail, and I'm not impressed. That's all I'm gonna say. I'm not impressed. You don't say those things in public. When you come out of parole, you say thank you very much and you live a quiet life. You don't try to game the system by making money, by being notorious. Doing that is just not a good thing ever. And I suspect she will also crash and burn at some point. I don't know what's wrong with people chasing being famous. I think it's there are more important things in life. Okay, guys, I'm gonna go ahead and go. Thank you for watching. I am gonna read another book today, and I don't know if I'll do a review or not. My daughter did give me a really good book. I know it's a good book because I've read other books similar to it about a lady who was a hospice nurse, and I can't wait to read that. I think that's gonna be a good book. See you later.